Can you imagine running a half marathon every single day for an entire year? Like, what kind of mindset and discipline and just sheer grit would that take? Well, today's guest, Trevor Cowley, is doing exactly that. Trevor has redefined what's possible, not just in business, but in life. From overcoming addiction to building multi-million dollar companies, his story is proof that resilience and mindset can shape your reality. And now, he's chasing a world record, pushing his limits like never before. In this episode, we dive into what it really takes to build an unstoppable work ethic, create unshakable discipline, and break through mental and physical barriers that might be holding you back. So if you're an entrepreneur, an athlete, or just someone who refuses to settle, this conversation will challenge the way you think about success. Let's go ahead and climb. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Born to Climb. I'm here with Trevor Cowley. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I'm excited.
So I'm really excited about this upcoming world record attempt. Tell us about that. What's the record you're going after and why are you doing it?
I'm going after the most consecutive half marathons in a row. Right now it sits at 235 days, and I plan on doing it for 365 days, and that starts March 23rd of 2025. So, I started a journey of looking for fulfillment, looking for purpose, and it was never about breaking a world record. The funny thing is when you start a journey of looking for fulfillment and for purpose in your life, and you start honoring what you're currently capable of, one thing leads to a next, that leads to a next, and then next thing you know, you find out what you're truly capable of, and you keep scratching your head and saying, well, what else can I accomplish? What else can I do that I thought to this version of me might be impossible, but what I'm doing now was impossible to the old version of me. And so my mind keeps wondering and says, well, what else? Because I just keep breaking these glass ceilings over and over and over. And it all came off of the back of just being at a low place. And I'm a big believer if somebody's at a low place, that is the most beautiful place to be, because everything in your life, your whole paradigm is shattered, and you're left with the foundation, and you have an opportunity to rebuild it the way that you want to, and not just live based upon the way society tells you to live, or a standard that somebody else created for themselves. And so I'm a big believer that lows are the biggest blessing that anybody could ever receive. It just really depends on what they do with it, right? Unfortunately, most people, when they hit a low, they use distractions, things, drugs, alcohol, money, buying the sports car if they're going through the midlife, all distractions from really going inward and having that opportunity to meet with yourself and really determine what's important to you and recreate your life, versus using distractions to kind of numb the pain that you're currently going through. So
Lows have a way of redefining our lives. I love everything you said about that. And I want to talk a little bit about some lows. As was mentioned in sort of the intro before you and I got on here, I mean, you're a successful guy. You have built businesses. You help people in their businesses now. But let's rewind the story in how did you get there and what was the low along the way?
Yeah. So I'll lead you all the way up, Look, man, I grew up really poor, ran around the wrong people. When you grow up in poor neighborhoods, usually don't have the best of role models, right? And so you end up running around with the street rats, so to speak, and start doing street rat type stuff. And so I started smoking weed and drinking at the young age of 13. Led me to struggling in school. I didn't graduate high school on time. Next thing you know, I'm 19 years old. I'm working a sales job. I was pretty good at it, but again, wasn't around the best of influences. Next thing you know, some people that I admired or looked up to that I thought was making great money offered me some pills. And next thing you know, I'm popping pills with them, and I'm making money and doing good at sales. But 6 short months later, I'm a full-blown heroin addict. And I end up with a needle in my arm, doing whatever I could to fuel my addiction. And I was at an extremely low place from the time I was 19 to almost 24 years old. It was about a month before I turned 24. My mom, thank God she didn't really give up on me after everybody else did. I was the drug addict that made other drug addicts feel good about being a drug addict because at least they weren't Trevor, right? That's how bad it got, and so I was their justification, right? And so I went up into the mountains with my mom and basically created an environment. I'm big on environments. If you want a certain result, what environment are you creating for the result that you say that you want, right? And so I created an environment where there was no way out. I was ready to face my demons head on and all my past bad decisions, and so. There was no cell phone service. There was no way to get down off of that mountain without trying to become a mountaineer and probably dying in the middle of the night, especially detoxing and going through withdrawals. I came off of that mountain, promised myself that I would never do anything to put myself through that much pain ever again, right? And so I went back into sales because I was pretty decent at it, made sure that the environment was a good environment, and I started stacking cash because I knew I wasn't the smartest of people. And I believe opportunity finds, one of two things: either individuals that are highly skilled, which I didn't really feel like I was. The only thing I was good at is sales, and there's many great salespeople. And money likes opportunity likes people with money. And so I knew if I was going to make it out that I had to save and have a bunch of money. So I purposely lived way beneath my means. I stacked cash. I was making 120 grand a year, living in a $750 crap hole townhouse, drove a $3,000 Mitsubishi Lancer that was paid off. Anyways, 3 years later, the opportunity found me. I had an opportunity to invest into a business, and I took advantage of that opportunity because I created an environment. In other words, I lived beneath my means while I was making money. That environment that I created allowed me to save the money that I needed to become a business owner. And so now I'm 26, 27 years old, and here I am, a business owner. And, that first year did okay, made 150, whatever it was. And I still lived by the same principle, lived beneath the means. And we ended up, I have multiple business partners. We ended up doing pretty well. And we took the money, we built reserves, and then went above and beyond that. We started another business and another business and another business. And so we had multiple business ventures going. And it got to the point where it was, 10, 11 years later, I got to the point where I was making an undeniable amount of money that money wasn't going to solve all my problems because I moved the goalpost just like anybody else. Hey, I'm going to be happy when I make 200 grand. Now 400, then a million, and then 1.5 million. And it got to the point where I had a year where I made $1.6 million personally, and I was kind of looking around and being like, okay, what am I going to do now? Say 2 million, 3 million? Like eventually, like money is just money, and you have everything that you need is taken care of, and you're left with yourself. And so there I was at 36, 37 years old, making good money, and I was left at a low place asking again, now what? Right? And so this was the lowest I had been since me, attempting to get off of drugs and detoxing and going through that low period of time. And that's when it was literally the story. It was 39 days before my 37th birthday. And I said, man, I need to prove to myself I'm getting better with age. And either I go buy the sports car and I distract myself from what I'm feeling, or I do something crazy, something that the old version of me would never do. And I said, what do I hate doing? I hate running. Everybody hates running, right? And so I walked into a room at the office and said, I'm going to run 37 miles on my 37th birthday. And I heard off in the distance a couple laughs and some chucks because people knew I wasn't a runner. And we had a couple runners in there that have been training for marathons and they pulled something and they can't do it or whatever. So they were laughing that I had this 39-day window to run 37 miles. And so that was all the motivation that I needed was just some doubters. And so I went home that day and ran 3 miles and said, what the heck did I even say that for? I trained 10 times. And at midnight, the second it turned my 37th birthday, I took off running, and I ran for 9.5 hours, and I ran 37 miles, and that altered me. That altered my life because I realized how much potential was laying in me dormant because I was just so focused on the finances and the money side of it, but I was leaving so much potential untapped in terms of what I was physically capable of. And when you honor what you're physically capable of, you get to see a side of your mind that you would have never normally seen, only chasing your potential financially, right? And so the body and mind were just, operating in sync. And it was a beautiful thing to throw this huge mountain out there of like 37 miles, short window. I watched my focus just narrow, and everything. Every morning I woke up, I was either stretching or running or so everything went towards, I've got this big objective and I've got to accomplish it. And so I did that. And guess what I did right after that? I told everybody about it for months. And I would get a dopamine hit off of telling people what I did do. And then next thing you know, 3 or 4 months later, I'm at a low place again. I felt best when I had a challenge, when I had this big mountain that I had to climb, when I was doing things that were forcing me to become the best version of myself, and these things that were forcing me to honor what I'm capable of, right? And so it was now November, my birthday's in July, and here I am telling people about this story of what I did do and still trying to get a high off of it. And I had to ask myself, when do you feel best in your body and mind? And the answer was immediate. When you move your body and you exercise, you never leave a workout wishing that you wouldn't have. You always, now going there's hard and sometimes being there's hard, but you never, when you're done, it always feels good. And so I said, man, I always feel. So it was January 1st of 2022 that I said, I'm going to do 1,000 two-a-days in a row. I'm going to exercise twice a day, every single day, because that's when I feel best. So I'm not going to just do it once. I'm going to do it every day, and I'm going to do it twice a day. And 3 or 4 months into it, I was like, okay, I'd hit the gym, and then I'd walk a couple miles in the evening, and I was like, man, this isn't hard to me anymore. And my birthday was starting to come around. It was almost July again. And so I was like, am I going to run 38 miles for my birthday? Like, am I going to do that? Is this going to be like a thing? And so I started running just a little bit, as I'm 5-6 months into this thing. And then I decided to do the 38 miles for my 38th birthday. And running started to be incorporated in my two-a-days more and more and more. And then a year and a half in, I had a thought. I would call it more of a download, because I believe when you receive a download, it's like something crazy. And then usually the first thought right after that's like, no, you can't. That's not you, And so that's why I call it a download, because the downloads tell you what you're capable of. And the thoughts are usually the thing that then doubts you after you receive the download. And so it was like September, so I had the 3.5 months left of the year. And it was like, man, could I run 10 miles a day for all of 2024? And my mind immediately said, there's no way, dude. There's no way. And so I was like, perfect. If you don't even think it's possible, but you're able to accomplish it, again, you're giving yourself undeniable proof that you're capable of doing things that even you think are impossible. So I started running 5 miles every single day, and I was like, why did I say I was going to do that? There's no way I can double it. Based upon the way I feel right now, there's no way that this is even going to be possible. But I turned 5 into 6. And then 6 into 6.5, 6.5 into 7. So every couple of weeks I would inch it up just about a half a mile, or so that it wouldn't be too harsh on my body. Next thing you know, it's December 31st, and I'm up to 9 miles every single. And then here we go. I did 10 miles every single day. I ran 4,015 miles in 2024, which is an average of 11 miles a day, because I ended up running 50 miles on my birthday that year when I turned 40. So I've ran every year on my birthday, the age that I turned, but when I turned 39, I ended up running 40 miles, and I was like, okay, I'm going to run 40 again now that I turned 40. I'm like, let's do a big one. Let's do 50. And so last year, me and 10 other people, met at my house, flew in from all over the place, and we ran 50 miles through the middle of the night. But the next day, waking up to do the 10 miles, I mean, that was tough. My body was pretty beat up, but averaged 11 miles a day in 2024, and it was December just recently as I was completing that goal, and I'd already completed the 1,000 two-a-days, which I turned into 3 years in a row. So that ended December 31st, 2024. I still do it now to this day, but I've took like 2 or 3 days off in between, and was just like, well, what do I do with all this free time now? I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. But I had another download about 2 weeks before the end of the year, because I said, what am I going to do? Go back to who I was? I'm like, once you see what you're fully capable of, there's no going back without you having to live with yourself knowing that you're living less than what you're currently capable of, right? And so I was like, what's the next goal? Am I just going to keep doing 10 miles a day? Like, what's the thing? The download hit and said, do a half marathon, beat a world record. And so I looked it up and it was 235 days. And I was like, that's too easy. That's mine. Like I've already ran what I've ran. My body's already acclimated to what it's acclimated to. And so that it's just been this unfolding of downloads and honoring those downloads and just, really coming from a dark place every single day. Now I live with a lot more purpose and fulfillment because I believe that you shouldn't be living off of old dopamine hits and old accomplishments. You should continue every single day to accomplish big things.
Trevor, so many great things about that story. Where do I even start? As you were talking about the first time you did the 37 miles, I think, on your first birthday and how impactful that was, it reminded me, and I'm sure you've heard it, when David Goggins talks about having to run 100 miles to qualify for that event. And so he did it in 19 hours. But he said that was more than anything he'd ever done. That changed his life more than Hell Week, the SEALs, all of that stuff. That one event, that 19 hours changed his life because it changed what he saw as his potential.
Yes, that's it. Just so that you know, a lot of what I'm doing has come off of the back of David Goggins and another individual, Cameron Hames. I got to when I was at a low point and I would sit there and watch people on social media living out amazing lives. I was getting a dopamine hit, like a little adrenaline, watching that, like motivated, and then I would do nothing with it. It's like getting out of a Rocky movie, and we all think that we're like nobody's gonna walk up to these hands in the parking lot because I'm a professional boxer. No, you're not. You're the same person who walked in. You're living off of a high. They just played on your emotions, and these chemicals happened, and now you feel so good. And so I literally got absolutely sick and disgusted with myself that I was watching other people live amazing lives, and I was actually getting a dopamine hit off of what they're doing. And here I am not doing anything in terms of honoring what I'm capable of. And I heard him on a podcast with Joe Rogan, and he said, "Do you take any days off?" He said, "No days off." And he goes, "Well, what's your easy day?" And he said, 7 miles. I start with 7 miles, and then I hit the gym. And so that was it. That was all I needed to hear right there. Okay, I think too many people compare their differences, and they don't find commonalities with people who are great. So I was like, okay, he's a man, I'm a man. I know I can be disciplined. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I know that my superpower is consistency. If it's meaningful enough to me, I can do something every day. And so I was like, okay, where's my starting point? And so I was like, okay, 7 miles. If I can get to the 7 miles every single day, we're playing on the same playground. The lines are starting to blur just a little bit. I'm not saying I'm David Goggins or anything like that, but what I was doing is I was trying to find a day where it meets his easy day. And my everyday is at least on the threshold of his easy, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. The 10 miles a day came off of, there was a download. Hey, try 10. I could have easily said 7, but it was, hey, get to 10. I want double digits. That to me is meaningful. But it was like, okay, I just need to get to the point where I can do 7 miles at least every single day. And I know for a fact that I'm at least starting to play on the same playground as him. And so I said, okay, that's where I want to be. What's the gap? Where's my starting point? Okay, I can do 4 or 5 miles every single day. I know I can. So now I've got my starting point, and I know the work that needs to be done to fill in the gap that was between me and him, right? And I can slowly chip away at that and work my way up to that. I have this thought all the time that, like, the greats eventually have to remove themselves from the throne. Age wins every single time, but somebody has to be in the shadows training for a decade or 2 decades for when somebody like that takes the time off that they need to take off because of age. There's a vacancy. Somebody's got to fill that role. And I believe that I'm the guy that's out there training. So when all the people that everybody currently looks up to starts aging and they start fading away, who's going to be the next individual to motivate, to inspire, to do amazing things, to push what the body's currently capable of? And so, like, those guys rally me. Like there was a time my wife probably thought I was crazy. I'm a big believer in brainwashing yourself to become whoever you want to be. Brainwashing is real. It's like we've all sung a Katy Perry song on the radio, and we couldn't sing it out if somebody asked us to sing it, but it's on the radio, and all of a sudden your brain knows it. It's because it heard it so many times on the radio that it thought it was of importance and started downloading it back there in your mind. Even though you can't recite it on moment's notice, when the tune comes on, now all of a sudden you're like, how do I even know this song? You just got brainwashed, right? Like that is deep into your subconscious. And so I'd lay in bed, David Goggins video. Why? Because I wanted to only put that type of mindset in front of my mind so that it was just absorbing it, so that eventually it just becomes a natural way of my own thinking, right? And so I'm a big believer in whoever you want to become or whatever you want to become, brainwash yourself, create the environment in which molds you to become the individual that you say that you want to become.
You and I don't know each other in terms of we just met today, and yet as you're sharing the stories, here's where we have some overlap. So a couple of years ago, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm out of shape, and I've been, I hit the gym here or there, but I just can't get into it. And it was July 4th, and I thought I need some motivation, and so I downloaded a book, audio book, David Goggins. I'd never read any of his books before. I downloaded his second book called Never Finished. And, the message is basically, get off the couch and get working out. And I'm on the couch while I'm listening to it. So I was like, all right, that's it. So I have a bunch of buddies. They work out all the time early in the morning, 5 a.m. And I thought, all right, I'm going to show back up. And so I go out and I'm suffering big time. But I kept listening to his book. I'm listening to YouTube videos on the way to the workouts, 4:30 in the morning, driving my car. And I'm just listening to those same, how he thinks, even this idea of you should suffer at least once every day. And it reshapes how you frame things. So I'd be in the middle of the workout, wanting to quit, and I would think about something that he said. But so here's the amazing thing about the brain, though, is the brain is still always going to look for a way out, right? It's going to look for an excuse. And in the back of my mind, I was like, this guy's close in age to me, but I'm still a few years older. So that was my one excuse to go, yeah, but he's younger than me, even though we're both in our 50s. And then when that book was done, I don't know how I got onto Cameron Hanes, but that was the next book I read. And then I'm like, oh shoot, this guy's older than me. And it's just the last excuse I had was gone. But it was almost like indoctrinating myself with that environment that completely leveled up for me and then transformed my health. And this comes back to the importance of what you said earlier about environment, that you can live anywhere in the world and still create an environment that's going to motivate you and inspire you, even if it's a bunch of YouTube videos.
Yep. Yeah, your brain doesn't know the difference. Look at dreams. We've all woke up, or thought we woke up and went to the school in our underwear, or falling or whatever it is, right? The brain can be tricked, and so you woke up in a panic. You thought it was real. There was nothing real about it, right? And so the brain only knows what you put in front of it. And so you have to be very calculated in terms of what you're putting in front of it, and make sure that it's in alignment with the individual that you want to become or the goals that you have for yourself, because there's far too often that we set the goals, but we don't create the environment that's conducive for that type of an outcome. We create the petri dish, right? And so I'm just a big believer in creating the environment that's most conducive to the outcome so that you have the highest probability of success at reaching that goal. And if you don't do that, it's just really a hope and a wish, because eventually you're going to succumb to one of those emotions. It's funny that you said you're the brain and finding a way out. I always would say, well, he's older than me, so he's had way more experience. He's been doing this for way longer than me, so he should be able to go further or faster. Or when I'm his age, I'm going to go faster. I'm going to go further too. I'm only 3 or 4 years into this journey, and he's been doing it for 20 years. So it's my brain gives me sometimes an out on some of the tough days of Yeah, man. Well, don't push it too hard. Like it's okay if you have, 9:30 miles or 10-minute miles, and he has 6-minute miles or 7-minute miles because he's been doing it longer, right? And then, it convinces me sometimes to pull back. But my game is more of a game of consistency than it is speed. Every so often, I'll, open the hips up and let it rip. But yeah, I'm trying to play, and I think that that's the game everybody should play is create an environment in which you show up in every single day in a manner in which is consistent enough to allow you to see and experience the result. It wouldn't matter if it's, hey, I'm going to do 10 push-ups every single day for 365 days in a row. I guarantee if that was the goal, you're going to end up doing more than 10 push-ups some days. But at least if you set the bar at what the minimum is, like I said, I set the goal of doing 10 miles every single day, but ended up averaging 11 because some days I'd run 15. Some days I ran that 50 mile for my birthday, right? So like, what's your floor? And like, that's really, really important for people to set minimums. I'm going to do this every single day on a daily basis, regardless, and then watch yourself outperform that some days, but at least you have kind of your guardrails of complacency set up to where you don't get too complacent, too lazy, and there's still a little bit of friction in your days, right? Which I do think is healthy.
Have you read the book Comfort Crisis?
No.
So in the book, he talks about, it's the commitment to doing hard things, right? And breaking out of comfort. But he has this principle, and I'm not even going to try to mention the word because I forget it, but it's this term for committing to something that is so difficult that the chances of you failing it's a 50-50 thing. And that every year, I think it's called a Muskogee or something. I think it's an indigenous word, but it's this idea of
It's the Masagi or Misogi or something like that.
Misogi, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. This idea of committing to something that's, like the going after the world record, maybe for a lot of people would be a Misogi. Maybe for you, that's not because you're just a determined guy like, hey, I'm just going to make this happen. But it's this idea of having hard things in your life. And I know when I'm coaching leaders in the business world, like in the corporate space, one of the things that I will bring up is this idea of, hey, when's the last time, like outside of work, when's the last time that you committed to something that was really hard, that excited you, that actually challenged you? And for a lot of people, myself included, we just get into these ruts, we get in these routines. You can convince yourself life's hard enough, and there's definitely a lot of difficult times to life, but there's something about picking a mountain to climb and then just going after it. I want to ask you about your work with business owners because you run masterminds, you've built businesses, you've made millions of dollars. When people come into your mastermind, how much of everything we just talked about, this idea of pushing yourself physically, how much of that bleeds into the mastermind when you're trying to help people grow their businesses?
Let's just say we have a few runners in the mastermind. I haven't twisted their arm or anything like that. But there's one guy, Brett Knott specifically. He joined the mastermind. He was about 300 pounds, and he's now ran 2 100-mile runs, races. He's tried 3. He failed one at like mile 60 or whatever it was, but he's completed twice. He's got a 250 miler coming up in the next like 3 or 4 months. He's now down to 195 pounds, so he's lost over 100 pounds. It wasn't my goal to have it become some fitness thing. I'm not saying it needs to be either, but I am a big believer in if you want to feel fulfilled and have self-worth, you're going to have to find some friction. You're going to have to overcome things that the old version of you didn't think that you would overcome. And then that's a deposit. Just like a deposit in your bank account increases your net worth. What are the deposits that you're making in your self-worth? Why is that important? Because if you start getting to the point where you're making money and your self-worth is low, you're going to try to spend all your money in order to fill that hole, to feel worth, right? To feel worthy. And usually what ends up happening is this thing that has the ability to create financial freedom, which is an abundance of money, ends up getting utilized to fuel your low self-worth because you haven't really done things for you as an individual that makes you feel happy and fulfilled. So maybe the car will, maybe the bigger house will, maybe the next trip will, maybe the next, these shoes or these clothes or so you're living for society standards in terms of trying to feel worthy about self rather than making daily deposits to yourself to where your self-worth grows. And when your self-worth grows and you feel good in your body and mind, you end up operating better in your businesses. And if you feel more worthy, then guess what? You're going to operate as such, and your standards then increase all over the place. If this is the standard that I hold to myself personally in terms of the way that I move my body or the way that I operate my body or what time I wake up, guess what happens? It starts bleeding into other areas of your life, into your business. Like, I now have standards. Okay, well, I'm not okay with people with low standards in my organization that don't show up on time, that don't complete their work, that make excuses. If I don't listen to my own excuses on days that are difficult, where I've ran in the snow. I've ran in 26-mile-an-hour headwinds. I've ran in the rain. I've ran throwing up on the side of the road because I'm sick. I've ran with headaches. Like, if I'm not accepting excuses from myself in terms of just, well, it's a tough day, I'm just not going to show up, why would I accept excuses from other people that are trying to bring down the caliber of standard that I have in my organization? It's just not acceptable, because you're going to get what you tolerate. Either you have a standard and you uphold that standard with your values, or the lowest person in your organization is the one that sets the standard, because they get to see what that person is getting away with. And if they're getting away with it, guess what happens? Well, why am I going to work really hard here if that person still has a job and they can do all that and still pick up a paycheck? Why am I going to go above and beyond because that person makes just as much as I do or close to it? And so what you're doing is you're rewarding complacency by not addressing it, keeping it within your organization. And really what's happening is you're complacent in your own personal life, and you let a lot of things slide in your personal life that you shouldn't, which then leaks over to your business. You just don't want to deal with the difficult conversations or the difficult things that the business has. Why? Because you don't deal with the difficult things that you should be doing as a human being, as an individual, to operate at your peak, right? And so I think it all kind of bleeds together. So I hope that answered the question.
Listen, for everyone listening, I hope you caught everything he just said there. This idea that if you don't have self-worth, and then you will end up having to use money to try to fill that hole. But the problem, it just never does. And it's not the best use of your money. Even the point about when you raise standards for yourself, you tend to raise them for those around you. And for those of you who are listening who run a business right now, that absolutely is a game changer. And as Trevor said, the standards, the lowest standard in your, not at the lowest, the highest standard in your company is what you allow the lowest kind of person to operate as. In other words, the ceiling is very low in your organization because you let things go. And this comes back to, it's one thing to do a physical challenge. A lot of business is emotional challenges, rejection, having to have difficult conversations, but they all go together. They all go together. Being able to have the fortitude to go, all right, I can, like you said, I've done this, I can run this, I'll do this. Now I have to go have this difficult conversation. It's a little bit less difficult when you are doing difficult things all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, if people see you hold yourself to a high standard, like by default, they're going to want to hold themselves to a high standard, naturally, and when you speak to them, it's not like, hey man, you can't be doing this, or we can't allow this or that. And it's just like, well, why am I going to listen to you? You allow this, and this in the organization, and you come and go, and you don't really, I've seen you break what you say are our standards. You don't honor the core values, but yet you want me to, right? And so I'm a big believer in, first, before you preach it or teach it, make sure that you live it and breathe it. Because if you live it and breathe it, for the most part, those that should be a part of your organization that are naturally motivated and inspired by somebody doing amazing things, they're going to elevate themselves. And if you have to have a difficult conversation, it's best to approach it as look, man, I just really don't think that you're operating at what you're capable of. I'm over here trying to do this every single day in order to extract my full potential. And to me, it just hurts me seeing you with so much potential just go unused. And so I wouldn't have you in my organization if I didn't think that you were a valuable part of it and I didn't think that you had potential. It's just I can't sit back and watch you not extract it or not honor what you're currently capable of. I would be doing you a disservice as a leader, allowing you to show up in the way that you're showing up. And I promise you, when you show up in a greater manner, even here at work, you leave work energized and you leave work with more self-worth, right? And so like, and I know that for a fact. When you leave work and you've laid down a good day and you're doing good things and you're, and it's somewhat difficult, like you walk away, today was a good day. I got a lot done. And it's like a deposit into your self-worth when you have people holding you accountable to what you're capable of, not just allowing you to be complacent and comfortable because you're like, man, it's a tough hiring market out there. And I'd have to hire and then train and all these things that I would have to do. That would put more work on my shoulders if I hold them accountable, and then they end up leaving the organization. And so then you create these stories that just aren't even real in order to justify you really not being man or woman enough to show up like you should and hold somebody accountable because you're worried about second thing or third thing or fourth. That stuff doesn't exist. You're making up things in your head. As long as you approach it the right way, people like to know that you see that they have more potential than what they're honoring. And then when you build them up as a mentor, not a manager, you'll see some amazing things happen.
When we work with CEOs, we'll often tell them that, listen, leadership is actually an energy. It's an energy you show up with that comes out of who you are, right? And so, back to your point about having difficult conversations, to me, the ultimate servant leader is not the one that's like, hey, do you need anything? Can I get you anything? The ultimate servant leader is the one who looks at their employees and knows, I believe you're capable of more. And it's my job to hold you to that, right? To push people. And Trevor, over, 15, almost 20 years now, when I think of some of the live workshops I've done, I've always asked people this one question. I've said, who has been a great leader in your life? And think about that person right now. And now I want you to write down, what was it about them that made them a great leader? And then I get everyone to share their answers, and everything is the same. It's always the same answers. And they all filter down into 4 buckets. And one of them was, the leader was in some ways an example, like they were out front blazing the trail. But number 2 was they pushed me. They challenged me. That is always there. And then along with that, they supported me in that and cared about me. Those 4 things always come back down to it. And again, leadership isn't easy, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Well, you look at some of the greatest head college football, head coaches in college football, like Nick Saban. Does he have a high standard or a low standard? Will he get after you if you're not honoring that standard? And because of that, are you winning at a greater level surrounding yourself with people like that? And he's doing it not because he hates you. He wants to see you succeed just as much as he wants to succeed. It's the high tides raise all ships thing, right? And so somebody's got to be the individual forcing the tide to raise so that you're just a part of that process. And I believe exactly what you just said exemplifies him. He was a great example, probably outworks even all of the football players. He's probably in his office early, in his office late, studying film, like, getting up in their faces when they make mistakes, not because he hates them, because he wants them to perform better. He holds a high standard for himself and everybody in the organization, and they all end up holding the trophy. They all end up getting the trophy, right? And he's probably created some amazing football players through his program that maybe wouldn't have been so amazing if they had a coach that was a little bit more complacent, maybe didn't have as higher of a standard and didn't hold them accountable to what they were capable of, right? And so you're exactly right.
And all that hard work is made easier when you're pushing yourself and doing the things like you're talking about here. Well, listen, Trevor, we're coming to the end of our time here. I want to say thank you for being on the show, and what you're doing is inspiring. I'm going to follow your progress. How can we follow your progress? Are you going to post that somewhere?
So I have an Instagram account. It's called Real Business Owners. Most of that's like business stuff, but I did create. It's called Few Are Free. Instagram page where I'm posting every single day my runs, so I'll post my Strava. So I'm running 10 to 11 miles a day right now. Obviously, within the next month, I'll be up to the 13.1 on a minimum, every single day. And so that's where I post every single day. And then sometimes in the stories, I'll say, hey, these are the best running shoes, or I use these natural salts to stay hydrated for sodium, or just kind of some tips and some things that I do to continue to keep my body and mind healthy for the journey. So
Fantastic. And for any business owners who want to know more about your mastermind, where can they go?
They can go to realbusinessowners.com or just DM me on Instagram at realbusinessowners. And so that account is more so dedicated to, business information, motivational, self-improvement stuff. And I answer every single DM that comes through. So
Fantastic. We'll have all that in the show notes, and you can find that at jamesrobbins.com/podcast and go to the episode with Trevor. Trevor, again, thanks for the time. Really great to meet you. I'm inspired. You've inspired me in this call to think of, what am I going to do? I need to up my game. So I'm going to figure out what's a Muskogee, or at least a mountain I can latch onto, and I'll let you know what it is.
Awesome. I'd love to hear it.
All right, brother. Take care.
Likewise.